What's going on, guys? It's Greg here, aka NYPrepper. It is Tuesday, March 26th, 2024, and I have an emergency alert to share with you guys. Right now, it is 1500 Eastern Time here in the United States, and we have some major breaking news coming in from Russia. So, just like I predicted, Russia is now fully blaming the US, the UK, and Ukraine for the concert hall terrorist attack that happened last Friday, where over 200 Russians were killed by Islamic terrorists. And Russia is basically blaming the US, the UK, and Ukraine for training, arming, and planning out this attack on Russian civilians at a concert hall on the outskirts of Moscow. Guys, this has huge implications. Okay, this could cause World War III and even nuclear war. Okay, so I told you this would happen. So please make sure you're getting prepared. Check out my nuclear war survival videos. I'll leave links in the top right corner. You need to know what to do in the event of a nuclear war. You need to have a plan. Where you're going to go to protect yourself from the blast and from the heat, where you're going to go to protect yourself from the fallout radiation. I talk about all of this in my nuclear war survival videos, so I'll leave links in the top right corner. So, the director of the Russian FSB, Alexander Bortnikov, said today, and I'm quoting him directly, there will be retaliatory measures following the terrorist attack. And he said this about Ukraine. He blamed Ukraine. The FSB is basically the new KGB. It's the KGB with a different name. Okay, so he's saying there will be retaliatory measures against Ukraine and anyone who was involved in planning this. And I want to read to you some things that the FSB director said. So, as you can see here on the screen, this is coming from the Sputnik Twitter account. Federal Security Service Director Alexander Bortnikov comments on whether the US and UK and Ukraine are behind the terrorist attack at Crocus City Hall. And he said, we think that is so. In any case, we are now talking about the facts that we have. This is general information, but there are already certain developments. And Putin yesterday gave a little speech where he linked Ukraine to this terrorist attack and also the US. I'm going to play that speech for you, but this is very, very serious. Western intelligence and Ukraine needed the Crocus City Hall terrorist attack to create panic in Russian society, Federal Security Service Director Alexander Bortnikov said. To shake up the situation, create panic in society, Bortnikov told reporters when asked about the West's and Kyiv's interests in the attack. Wow. Okay, this is absolutely crazy, guys. They are just literally trying to find any reason to blame Ukraine and the West. Here we have another tweet from Sputnik. The security service of Ukraine should be recognized as a terrorist organization, the FSB director noted, adding that the terrorist threat in Russia remains. The Ukrainian special services facilitated the terrorist attack and it was prepared by radical Islamists, Russia's Federal Security Service Director Alexander Bortnikov said. Wow. Okay, and yesterday, Russia launched a hypersonic missile attack at the capital of Ukraine, Kyiv, where they were trying to take out the intelligence service locations in Ukraine. So that could have been just the beginning of retaliation by Russia, but I think we're going to see massive strikes on Ukraine very soon. I don't know if it's going to be this week or next week, but this is extremely serious. Okay, here you have the director of the FSB, that's like the CIA director, okay, saying that Ukrainian special services facilitated the attack and it was prepared by radical Islamists, and that the security service of Ukraine, the Ukrainian intelligence, should be recognized as a terrorist organization, okay, and that there will be retaliatory measures. This is extremely serious, guys. Key statements of Russia's Federal Security Service Director Alexander Bortnikov regarding the Crocus City Hall terrorist attack. The main beneficiary of the terrorist attack outside Moscow has not yet been identified, but we see who organized and who recruited, and we will do everything to establish the organizers. The information transmitted by Washington about the preparation of a terrorist attack was of a general nature, and the Russian special services reacted to it. We know that Ukraine trained militants in the Middle East, okay? And there were some jihadists that they specifically named that Zelensky pardoned some kind of jihadist. And they're basically saying that they pardoned these jihadists to recruit them so they could attack Russia, train jihad. Basically, what they're saying is Ukraine and or the Western intelligence agencies recruited and trained and armed jihadists from the Middle East to do this, to create panic in Russian society. I mean, that is just a huge stretch, in my opinion. Okay. Many elements indicate that Ukraine is behind the terrorist attack in the Crocus City Hall, said Russia's Security Council Secretary Nikolai Patrushev. Do you guys know who Nikolai Patrushev is? He is one of Putin's closest friends. Guys, countless people are mistaking private browsing tabs as a way to stay anonymous online. Even with private browsing mode enabled, you can still be tracked by websites and internet service providers. Also, your data is still at risk if you are using unsecured or public Wi Fi hotspots. That's why I've been protecting my privacy and data with Virtual Shield VPN. I sleep well at night knowing that my data and privacy is not exposed to governments, hackers, and big tech. And if you use the link in the description below this video, which is virtualshield.com/deals/NYPrepper, you can get 70% off and a 60-day risk-free trial. With Virtual Shield's anonymous browsing, a strict no-log policy, unlimited bandwidth, and built-in malware and ad blocking, Virtual Shield also has 24/7 customer support and was built in the USA. So start protecting yourself today. Use the link in the description, which is virtualshield.com/deals/NYPrepper to get 70% off and a 60-day risk-free trial. He used to be the FSB director years ago, right after Putin became prime minister and then president. Patrushev took over Putin's position as the FSB director. This guy is really, really shady. And I want to just read to you something that he recently said. So he was asked by a reporter if it was Ukraine or ISIS, and he said, of course, Ukraine. Okay. Now, Patrushev is part of Putin's inner circle, like I said. And here we have a video of Vladimir Putin yesterday. I want to play this whole video for you. This is very, very important. You have to watch this, and I'm going to read the subtitles for you if you can't watch.
Абсолютно ясно одно. Ужасное.
It is absolutely clear that the terrible crime committed on March 22nd in the capital of Russia is an act of intimidation, as I have already said.
Преступление, совершенное 22 марта в столице России, это акция устрашения, как я уже сказал.
And immediately the question arises, who benefits from this?
И сразу же возникает вопрос, кому это выгодно? Это злодеяние может...
This villainous act can only be a link in a whole series of attempts by those who have been fighting our country since 2014 through the neo-Nazi Kiev regime. So you see, he's linking it to Ukraine. I mean, this is just absolutely insane, guys. Absolutely insane. He has completely lost his marbles here.
Может быть лишь звеном в целой серии попыток тех, кто с 2014 года воюет с нашей страной руками неонацистского киевского режима. А нацисты, как
As it is well known, Nazis have never shied away from using the dirtiest and most inhumane means to achieve their goals. Okay, so he's talking about basically Ukraine doing this, okay, because we know he calls Ukrainians Nazis. I can't say the word.
хорошо известно, никогда не брезговали использовать самые грязные и бесчеловечные средства для достижения своих целей. Тем более,
Especially today when their much touted counteroffensive has failed completely. This is now acknowledged by everybody. Nobody disputes it. Nobody disputes it.
сегодня, когда их разрекламированное контрнаступление полностью провалилось, это уже признано всеми, не оспаривается, российские вооруженные
The Russian armed forces maintain the initiative along the entire line of contact, and all measures taken by the enemy to stabilize the front are failing.
силы удерживают инициативу по всей линии боевого соприкосновения, а все предпринимаемые противником меры по стабилизации фронта успеха не приносят. Отсюда и
Hence the attempts to enter and establish a foothold on our border territories. They're shelling, even using multiple rocket launcher systems on civilian areas. He's talking about Belgorod.
попытки зайти и закрепиться на наших приграничных территориях, обстрелы, в том числе используя системы залпового
Which, by the way, is actually not true. They're not using multiple launch rockets. It's actually Russia that's shelling their own towns to try to eliminate these Russian rebels.
огня мирных кварталов, объектов гражданской, в том
Civilian targets, including energy infrastructure, and attempts to launch missiles at the Crimean Bridge and the peninsula itself. So he's really pissed off, guys, okay? He's pissed off that Ukraine is pounding Crimea, pounding the Crimean Bridge, going after the oil refineries, going after these towns in southwestern Russia with the rebels, and now the terrorist attack. You see what he's doing? He's linking all of this together and blaming it all on Ukraine. And I'm telling you, there's going to be some kind of massive escalation very, very soon. So please get prepared, okay? Please.
числе энергетической инфраструктуры, попытки ракетных ударов по Крымскому мосту и самому полуострову. В этот ряд вполне
This logically includes bloodthirsty acts to intimidate, similar to the attack carried out in Moscow. Wow. So he's linking all those attacks on the oil refinery. So he's linking all the Ukrainian attacks on the oil refineries on Crimea to the attack in Moscow, and basically saying it's Ukraine's calling card.
логично вписываются и кровавые акции устрашения, подобные теракту, совершенному в Москве. Цель, как я уже сказал,
The goal, as I have already said, is to sow panic in our society and at the same time to show their own population that not everything is lost for the Kiev regime.
посеять панику в нашем обществе. И в то же время показать своему собственному населению, что для киевского режима еще не все потеряно. Нужно только
All that remains is to follow the orders of their Western puppeteers to fight to the last Ukrainian.
исполнять приказы своих западных кураторов, воевать до последнего украинца, исполнять команду из Вашингтона и принимать новые
Execute Washington's commands and adopt a new law on mobilization, creating something like the Hitler Youth version 2.0, of course. Wow. It's just absolutely insane, guys. I can't believe I'm seeing this. It doesn't surprise me at all. And what's interesting is there was actually an entire security force located literally in the same building as this shooting occurred, and they didn't do a single thing. Okay, here's the location of the Pavshino Police Department, and you can see it's located in the same area. Here's the Crocus City Hall. That's where the shooting took place. And then here at the Crocus Expo, you can see Pavshino Police Department. Absolutely insane, guys. And here we have Nikolai Patrushev saying it was Ukraine that conducted this attack.
Значит, Украина.
Of course, Ukraine. ISIS or Ukraine?
Украина. Значит, Украина.
Of course, Ukraine. There's Patrushev. What a scumbag. And the U.S. Department of Agriculture says bird flu has been identified in unpasteurized milk from cows in Texas and Kansas. So remember a few weeks back, or actually it might be a few months now, when they were talking about disease X at the WHO meeting? Yeah, looks like that could be bird flu. And Poland said NATO protocol forbade them from shooting down the Russian cruise missile the Kremlin intentionally guided through Polish airspace for 39 seconds on the way to attack Ukraine. And the Polish president Andrzej Duda said that NATO is considering the option of shooting down Russian missiles when they fly towards North Atlantic Alliance territory. Wow. So NATO may start shooting down Russian missiles as they start flying towards NATO, because this is the fourth missile that flew into Poland. The fourth missile, one of them crashed in Poland and actually killed two farmers. Then there was one that flew all the way into northwest Poland and crashed in the woods right outside of a NATO base. Didn't have any warhead on it. It was just a concrete warhead. So obviously it was a probing attempt by Russia. And then there was the one at the end of last year, December 29th. Russia launched a missile towards Ukraine and it flew 40 kilometers into Poland before turning around and going back towards Ukraine. And then the one over the weekend that flew just 39 seconds into Poland, that flew just 39 seconds over Poland. But this is huge. Polish President Andrzej Duda saying NATO is considering the option of shooting down Russian missiles when they fly towards North Atlantic Alliance territory. So Poland saying that NATO protocol forbade them from shooting down the Russian cruise missile, just like I suspected. And the president of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko, said the situation in the northwestern part of Belarus is difficult, claiming that Lithuania and Latvia are massing forces on the border with Belarus. And I find it interesting that he's saying this now after he moved an entire mechanized brigade to the border of Lithuania, just literally 20 miles from the capital of Lithuania, Vilnius. He moved an entire mechanized brigade and put it on wartime status and drafted 5,000 soldiers. So it looks like we're going to see Belarus go to war with Lithuania and Latvia. Okay, for the last year or so, I've said that Russia may invade the Baltics, but it may actually be Belarus to do it, which would keep Russia out of the situation. Okay, basically, Belarus would be a proxy for Russia, and they would attack Lithuania and Latvia and open up another front for NATO without having Russia involved. Okay, so it would prevent a direct conflict with NATO, but it would still create problems for NATO and cause panic. And meanwhile, Russia could launch this massive offensive to try to retake the capital of Ukraine and try to go for Odessa, the main port city in Ukraine. I think it's going to happen simultaneous. I think Belarus is going to attack Lithuania and Latvia. And then at the same time, Russia is going to launch this huge offensive. Sergei Shoigu, the Russian defense minister, said last week that they're going to be creating two new ground armies this year with 16 divisions and 14 brigades, which could amount to 750,000 troops, guys. Okay. And the number of people injured in the attack in Moscow has increased to over 361, and the remains of several dozen people may remain under the rubble. It will be difficult to identify them because of the high temperature of the fire. And in Belgorod last night, that's in southwestern Russia, local authorities reported the shooting down of 13 drones that were coming in from the Ukrainian direction. Residents of Belgorod region filmed rain of debris and powerful kabooms. Here we have a video of that. So here you can actually see the interceptors working, the Russian missile interceptors here. You can see this object flying through the air. That's the Russian air defense. Okay. All these explosions in the air are the Russian air defense missiles. So the situation in southwestern Russia is continuing to escalate, and Putin is losing his patience essentially. And although we haven't seen him do anything major yet, it's coming. I'm telling you, it's coming. I think he's going to even use weapons of mass destruction. I don't know what kind. I'm very concerned he could use chemical weapons before going nuclear, and he could just deploy chemical weapons over vast areas of the battlefield along the front line, or he could even use them against cities. Okay. And here we have a video coming out of Belgorod today, and you can see fire there and some smoke. I don't know if this was caused by Russian shelling or these Russian rebels shelling the area, but the situation is escalating. And for all we know, Russia could be shelling these areas as a false flag. In other words, Russians know that those rebels are operating there, and all the Russian military has to do is just shell their own towns and then blame it on those rebels, and Russians will just believe it, you know. So it could all be actually the Russian military doing this and not those rebels, because as far as I know, those rebels don't have rocket launchers. They just had armored personnel carriers and armored fighting vehicles and some tanks. And right now, at this hour, we have 2 nuclear war command and control planes in the air over Texas, and we also have a nuke sniffer plane in the air. Pretty interesting. So our nuclear forces are on high alert. And last night, we had NATO surveillance and reconnaissance of the Russian Northern Fleet. We had a Swedish reconnaissance plane flying near the Kola Peninsula in the Lapland of Finland. And then at the same time, there was a U.S. RC-135 patrolling the coastline of the Kola Peninsula. And this is where Russia has most of their nuclear armed submarines. So something's going on if we're having both of these reconnaissance planes flying here at the same time. Okay, you see the Swedish one in Finland, and then the U.S. one over the Barents Sea, and both of them are keeping an eye on this area. So they're keeping an eye on how many Russian subs are in port, how many are deployed, and that tells you the general level of readiness of a country's nuclear forces. If they have most of their nuclear armed subs not in port, that means that they're on high alert, okay? And I personally believe Russian nuclear forces are on very high alert right now, because over the weekend there were some very strange signals being broadcasted on shortwave radio coming from Russia. So get prepared, guys. This could go nuclear, just like in Call of Duty Modern Warfare. Okay, if you've ever played that game from 2010, the whole premise of the game, the whole plot centers around a Russian nationalist and his group that go into a airport in Russia and shoot it up and kill hundreds of people. And then afterwards, the US blames the CIA and America for trying to basically overthrow Russia, for trying to overthrow the government, and they launch a full-scale nuclear attack on NATO, including the United States, and also an invasion of the US and Europe. So that could happen, guys. It could happen. Predictive programming. You ever hear of that? And here's that US RC-135 that flew all the way up to the Russian Arctic. It went all the way to Novaya Zemlya, and then it was patrolling near the Kola Peninsula. So very interesting. And over the weekend, we flew 2 B-1 bombers over here to the Kola Peninsula, okay, in a show of force, showing Russia, hey, we could nuke the crap out of your northern fleet if we want to. So very serious, guys. Lots of escalation. And then here we have those 3 KC-135s that are responsible for refueling the B-1s. They took off from Luleå and they flew north towards the Barents Sea, and then somehow they came around over the Norwegian Sea and then landed in the UK. And in Luleå, Sweden, we moved 2 B-1s last month. So I don't know if they're still there or if they're in the UK, but these 3 took off from Luleå. Okay, so it's very possible there was a bomber with these 3 aerial refuelers. And here we have a U.S. sub-Hunter plane that was patrolling the Baltic Sea off the coast of Poland and the Russian exclave of Kaliningrad. And then we had 2 KC-10 extenders go to the UK last night, which is interesting. These are aerial refuelers with a huge capacity. These are the type of aerial refuelers that you use to refill bombers in the air. And we moved 2 of them to the UK. So we're moving a lot of assets to Europe, okay? And last night we had a B-52 nuclear bomber looping over upstate New York in the Adirondack Mountains, which is extremely unusual. It came from North Dakota and it was just looping for hours over the Adirondacks. And at the same time, there was a U.S. Army Predator drone flying over Fort Drum. So I don't know if maybe there was a balloon incursion into our airspace in the Adirondacks, and they deployed that B-52 and the MQ-1C, which is like a U.S. Army Predator drone. Okay, and here you can see that MQ-1C and the B-52 flying over the northern Adirondack Mountains in upstate New York. This is extremely unusual, guys. A B-52 has no reason to fly over the Adirondack Mountains. It makes zero sense. Okay, there's nothing there that would be relevant to a nuclear bomber flying over it. Okay. And here you can see a close-up shot of the MQ-1C and the B-52. So I don't know if something flew into our airspace or if they were doing exercises, but that's extremely unusual, guys. Okay. And we also had 3 KC-135 Stratotankers flying in Canada, obviously practicing or potentially responding to something. Okay. Canada is responsible for patrolling our northern airspace. Okay, Canada is linked into NORAD. They're part of NORAD. In a nuclear war, we would actually defend Canada, and we have a lot of early warning radars in Canada. Okay, we have dozens of early warning radars in Canada. In the Cold War, we had 3 lines of early warning radars in Canada to detect ballistic missiles coming over the Arctic. We still have one. It's called the North Warning Line, and it goes all the way along the Canadian Arctic, all the way up in northern Canada. Okay, so guys, our nuclear forces have been on high alert for the last 2 months. And in the last couple of days, it's really just off the charts. We had some British fighter jets fly to Romania on Sunday. And also, we had this weird plane from the German Air Force flying over the Baltic Sea. It didn't have any information about it at all. So, very interesting. And according to the U.S. and Ukrainian defense officials, the missile attack yesterday by the Russian armed forces against Kyiv and Odessa in Ukraine, utilizing hypersonic and short range ballistic missiles, was an attempt at assassinating high ranking members of the Ukrainian government, in addition to targeting facilities used by Ukraine's intelligence agency. Okay, so they wanted to assassinate high ranking members of the Ukrainian government yesterday. And Hamas rejected Israel's 6-week ceasefire offer, which was based on exchanging 40 hostages for 700 Palestinian terrorist prisoners. And this means that the ground invasion of Rafah will start as soon as Ramadan ends. And the Supreme Commander of the NATO Military Committee calls on all civilians across Europe and North America to be prepared for an emergency. Pretty interesting. Russia will be deploying Pantsir air defenses and anti-drone systems around infrastructure buildings across western Russia, including oil refineries, fuel depots, ports, as well as several power plants in response to massive Ukrainian drone attacks in the past 2 weeks that have taken down as many as 15 oil refineries and reduced Russia's oil production by 10%. So they're setting up air defenses now around those oil refineries. Ukraine has claimed yet another successful strike on Russia's Black Sea Fleet, announcing today that the landing ship Konstantin Olshansky was hit by a Neptune missile, and also the reconnaissance ship Ivan Hers was also hit by a missile. So they took out 4 ships in the last 3 days. I'm sure Putin's not happy about that. And they also took out the Information and Communications Center of the Russian Black Sea Fleet over the weekend. And based on sources from judicial authorities in Russia, the terrorists who carried out the attack in Moscow received training in Istanbul, Turkey for 2 months. Very interesting. The head of Ukraine's intelligence agency said Russia is no longer using the Crimean Bridge for weapons supplies after repeated strikes by Ukraine, and France could clash directly with Russia if the Ukrainian front collapses. This was reported by LCI TV channel in France. Very interesting. And what they basically said was that if the Ukrainian front lines collapse, then France would deploy troops to Ukraine to stop the Russians from reaching Kiev and Odessa, which are basically essential cities for the survival of Ukraine as a state. Ukraine is an agricultural exporter, and Odessa is a major port city. If Russia captures it, then they cut off Ukraine from the Black Sea, and they're going to immediately lose like 50% of their exporting capability, or maybe even more. Their economy would crash. And if they take the capital, well, obviously, we know what would happen then. So it looks like France is ready to deploy forces to Ukraine if the front lines collapse. And senior U.S. officials have denied any involvement in last night's airstrikes against the IRGC in the cities of Deir ez-Zor, Mayadin, and Al Bukamal in eastern Syria. The strikes resulted in the death of roughly 20 members of the IRGC and other Iran-backed militias. It's very likely that Israel conducted these strikes. We know that some IRGC commanders were taken out and injured in the strikes. And according to South Korean defense officials, North Korea is currently preparing for the launch of another military reconnaissance satellite. South Korea is also expected to launch a military reconnaissance satellite in April. And a commuter in New York City was killed after being pushed in front of a moving New York City subway train in an unprovoked attack. This comes just 2 weeks after a man was shot in the head after an altercation in a subway car. And also, there was a 31-year-old police officer in New York City that was shot and killed Monday in Far Rockaway, Queens. So New York City is spiraling out of control with their crime. Things are really getting bad over there. Here we have some pictures of the Ukrainians building fortifications. They're digging in to prevent the Russians from breaking through and capturing large swaths of territory. They're rushing to complete these bunkers and trench lines and fortifications because they basically have no defense lines. Okay, Russia had the Surovikin line, and that's one of the reasons why the Ukrainian counteroffensive failed last year. And Ukraine doesn't have anything like that. So if Russia sends 500,000 troops to the front, the whole front line is going to collapse. Okay, so they're rushing to build fortifications here. And here we have some video footage of this ship that hit the bridge in Baltimore, the Key Bridge, Francis Scott Key Bridge. Check this out. Absolutely insane. You can see the ship colliding with one of the supports, and then the whole bridge goes down. This is obviously in slow motion. Okay, so very sad situation. We need to keep the victims in our prayers, but a very strange situation. This ship lost power several times before it collided with the bridge. Okay, so something was wrong with this ship apparently, but who knows? It could have been some type of a hybrid attack on our country by some of our enemies. Okay, this entire bridge has been destroyed now. This is a major bridge in Baltimore, okay, on the Chesapeake Bay. So that's some of the latest breaking news that I have. I will be back tonight with more breaking news. So make sure you're subscribed. Hit the bell icon down below so you get notified when I post these updates. And until then, take care, God bless, and don't forget the 3 Ps: prepare, practice, and persevere. This update was sponsored by My Patriot Supply. Guys, My Patriot Supply has brought back their 25% discount on their 3-month emergency food supply. And to get the discount, you got to use the link preparewithnYprepper.com. And the link is in the description below this video. But this 3-month emergency food supply has a 25-year shelf life. It includes over 2,000 calories per day. Breakfasts, lunches, dinners, drinks, and snacks, all contained within 6 rugged water resistant buckets, and free shipping is included. So use the link preparewithnYprepper.com to get $200 off or 25% off of the My Patriot Supply 3-month emergency food supply. The link is in the description below this video. Free shipping is included. They also have a general store where they sell all kinds of prepping and survival products, and they're always running various discounts. And to get to their general store, you just got to click on the My Patriot Supply logo when you get to preparewithnYprepper.com at the top of the page, and you'll see their general store where they sell all kinds of prepping and survival products, and they're always running discounts here. So use the link preparewithnYprepper.com to get 25% off of the My Patriot Supply 3-month emergency food supply, and the link is in the description below this video.